All right, and we are live. So this is episode 5, I think. Yeah, I've lost count. um, of the Headphone Show live stream, and today we have Ryan from Modhouse Audio, a very well known modder manufacturer for the Argon headphone, Argon Mark III is the current revision. It's basically a T50 mod. So all the guys who started off their illustrious headphone careers modding headphones, like Mr. Speakers, Dan Clark, and Zach from ZMF, Ryan is still doing them. So I feel like I should let you give an introduction, for everybody else who probably watching this. Tell us a bit about how you got into modding and just what it is that you do.
Sure. So I was really into speakers back when I was in high school, and that would have been, oh gosh, like 15 years ago. But then after I moved out of my parents' house and went into college, I didn't have an environment where I could use speakers anymore. And I kind of, most of the time when I was at college, I kind of got by with crappy old USB headset, basically. And then one day that finally broke completely, and I thought, you know what, I should get something a little better than. And now at the time, this was probably, I want to say 6 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that. I didn't know about HeadPhone, was not at all knowledgeable about the hobby. Just went on Newegg and looked for highly rated headphones, and surprisingly enough, I stumbled on the Philips SAP 9500.
as we all did.
But oddly enough, this was before they were known in the hobby. Like this was,
Right.
I guess, just came out consumer facing headphones. But I was like, wow, I was really impressed by them, and thought, I don't really, the pads I don't really find too comfortable, and I wanted to try and swap them, but I realized, they use a proprietary pad mechanism. And my dad had actually gotten me a 3D printer for my birthday, and I thought, you know what, I'll try and put this to some practical use rather than just 3D printing toys off of Thingiverse. And so I made some adapters and some other miscellaneous stuff for the Philip.
Was that to close off the headphone? Yeah.
That was one of the things. So yeah, I did a couple different revisions of like cups to close them off, with mixed results.
I think I've seen one of them. One of them is like fairly like wide.
Yeah, they're pretty funny looking, and they're not fully closed either. It's like turning them into semi-open, I guess.
Gotcha.
There's still this kind of strange but a gap between the baffle and the back of the cup. So like the grill where the driver is, that's where the cup goes, but there's still a kind of a leaky baffle around where the pads go. So it's like it leaks less, but it's not really as closed as you'd want it to be. But that was my goal, to make them closed, in quotes. Again, I didn't know what I was doing at the time really, or what effect it would have. But when I did that and it changed the sound pretty dramatically, that experience kind of got me hooked on the idea of, oh, okay, well, so you can mod headphones to change the sound. And before I didn't even think about that. Again, this was like probably 6-7 years ago. And then I stumbled. What did I do? I guess I posted on Reddit first. I saw Reddit first, and then I learned about HeadPhone. And then on HeadPhone, then I kind of got into the world of grotto modding, actually, before I started doing 250s.
And that's there's a whole community around that.
Yeah. Yep.
I actually, just to interrupt you there, sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
We got a bit of like robotic sound going on here. Can you in Discord just change the sensitivity of the mic? I think it's just not picking up enough.
Okay. Should I raise it or lower it, you think?
Make it more sensitive.
Okay.
And then what headphones, real quick, while you're doing that, are you rocking right now?
These are HD 580s.
580s. There
you go. I'm a little jealous of Max's signed ones.
I remember at the next show, you got to get yours signed.
Yeah, if Axel's there again, I gotta meet him. At the time, so when I was actually trying out DMS's mod Diana's, and then I forget if it was Metal or Max was like, "Oh, hey, there's Axel Grell," And at the time I was like, oh, where is he? But then I was like, well, no, I got to listen to these. So then then I lost track of him, and I never got a chance to talk to him. But yeah, if I ever get the chance, I'd like some signed 580. I've been these have been kind of like my mainstay for the last several years, and I know there's a lot of fans of the Sennheiser, 580, 600, XX
Yeah.
series, all that stuff.
Hey man, I think you gotta like turn the sensitivity up, not the volume, because like it keeps like cutting out a little bit.
Sorry. Is that any better?
Yeah, I think so. Just saying hi to people in the chat here. See Antdroids in the chat. How's it going, buddy?
Oh, nice.
Good to see you. Metal was here. I guess he's gonna watch it later. But yeah, sorry. I'll let you continue there with it. I interrupted you.
Oh, sure. Sorry. So yeah, first I got into grotto modding, and I still have like a few like props around here, pretty much like just memorabilia almost of that era. I have some aluminum cups. So I did that for a little bit. But
now, just so people are aware, what are those called? The grotto modded headphones. I remember there's a name for a bunch of them.
Well, there's a bunch of drivers you can get for them.
Yeah.
And people usually call them based on the driver that you use. So like, there's the Synphones Magnum, the was it the Nord? The
Nord is the one I'm familiar with. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Have you heard any of the what is it? I used to have Magnum V8s. No, sorry, V7s. I want to get some V9s. They do look pretty promising. I've tried the Nords briefly, but that was meat conditions, so
yeah.
Unfortunately, didn't get a real good sense of them. And I guess there's the Ypsilons. I haven't heard those. The Turbulent, I think the Turbulent X drivers. So yeah, people tend to focus on the wood and the drivers.
Well, it's kind of fun because with Grotto, it's basically just a driver and a pad with a small like it's the perfect thing to be modding because you have access to very easy access to the driver essentially.
Yep, absolutely.
And I mean, for me at least, they're some of the most uncomfortable headphones I've ever worn. with the stock pad, it sort of feels like this kind of like rough socks material, or like something like this where it's like this kind of foam material, like stiff hard foam.
Yep.
Unpleasant. So when I assume when they get modded, sorry, it's probably a bit loud. I assume when they get modded, it's the comfort is also improved.
Yeah, there's some aftermarket pads. I think to me the biggest difference was using I think they call them the push pads or the salad bowl pads. Some people call them. I don't have any handy at the moment, but the flat ones are called the S Cush. The kind of donut ones are called the L Cush, and then the large ones are the G Cush. And the G Cush are a lot more comfortable than the other two, at least for me. And for me, I don't mind the comfort on the G Cush. It's more the other two that I can't really stand for very long. But I know where you're coming from. But the G Cush, so the aftermarket drivers, at least in my experience, seem to work better with the G Cush than most of the stock grottos.
Right.
That's
gonna... With modding them, the goal is to also, I mean, I guess it's like with modding anything, it's to try and improve certain aspects of the frequency response. And with some of those grottos, would you say it would be to, let's say, add a little bit more bass, bring down some of the...
yeah. I would say the aftermarket drivers have a little and a little less upper mids and treble.
Yeah, cool.
So they do what you would imagine people would want them to do.
for grottos, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Although I like the stock, was it the SR 80s and the 60s, like the entry level ones? I don't mind those stock, but the higher end ones with the G Cush, that's a little more troubleful than I like. But with the aftermarket drivers, that helps out a lot.
Do you find that the drivers there, like, to base a mod off of that driver, do you find it to be reasonably capable?
Uh, I haven't had much time with the higher end grottos, but with the aftermarket ones, at least the Symphone. Symphones is the only one that I've owned. And I thought it was pretty decent. Yeah, I would encourage anyone who's curious to give them a try. Not, I haven't tried the newest ones, but you know,
Well, see, it's funny.
interesting to me.
I have kicking around here somewhere a 325E, I think.
Okay.
I just it's something I'm supposed to review, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But I have heard it, and while the tuning is clearly not for me, and neither is the comfort, you can tell that there's something promising about the driver. Right? It seems like there's something there, and I even like in the back of my head when I was listening to it, I was like, you know what? I understand why people want to mod this stuff. It seems like the perfect kind of like basis for changing the frequency response.
Yeah, it's a neat thing. It's a big community. Well, at least I guess it's a sub community of the broader headphone modding community
Within context.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's more Grotto modders or more T50 modders out there.
Interesting.
I'd say it's probably a toss up, but I haven't looked in on the HeadPhi community for a little while.
So after that you got into T50 modding, or was that around the same time?
So let's see. Yeah, I know. So I was kind of browsing. I spent a lot of time on HeadPhi, and at first, it was like Grotto. There's a huge Grotto modding, several large Grotto modding threads. But yeah, at some point, I don't know how I got redirected there. I heard about like the vintage ortho thread and the T50 thread, and there was one guy in particular. I think it was the Blue Monkey Flyer. I think his name is thread where it's very detailed. He gives very good instructions. It's very well documented on how he does his modding, and then that people kind of picked up from there and just went nuts. And so I got a set of T50s, and I started messing with them. And even though I messed with them for probably, I want to say 2 or 3 months, something like that, something was kind of missing, and I was just, I don't know, wasn't feeling too satisfied. But at the time, I had very little headphone experience at all. Like I had never been to a show or meet. I hadn't tried any of the higher end stuff. I was kind of flying blind at the time. But then I went to my first HeadPhi meet, and again, I think this would have been 2015, 2016, I think. I think 2015, and then I got to try most of the stuff that was popular at the time on the market, and that kind of helped. That kind of opened my eyes to what was possible as far as headphones go. Oh wow, this is
right.
Like probably like going from Grotto mods to LCD2s. It's a pretty big difference.
Right.
And just getting to try it wasn't just LCD2s. I had to try HD800s. Gosh, what all was big at the time? All the Sennheisers.
Well, I mean, there would have been other planars as well. Like I know that there's a bunch of Hi-Fi Man stuff that was out then, even earlier, and
I think I got to try HE6 and HE500 at the time. I like those. LCD2, LCDX.
And then was that like a moment for you where you were like, I like planar tech? There's something unique about planar tech? Or just headphones in general?
I think just headphones in general. Really, at the time, I didn't really think too much about separating planar from dynamic.
Okay.
But then also, and I met Zach there too. And
oh, cool.
Yeah, he was actually like the first person I met there, and he's a really nice guy. He's great, and I like his stuff. And so getting to hear his T50 mods and be like, oh, okay, so obviously I'm missing something, kind of thing. And it turns out the biggest thing that I was missing was larger pads. That at the time I was using mostly, what is it? Shure, what are they? I'm blanking on the name, but I was using a lot of like smaller, flatter pads, and
like brainwaves.
Yeah, like brainwaves. Shure stuff. What else? Again, sorry, I'm blanking on it. They didn't exist yet.
Right. This was
Yeah.
pre-deconing. Yeah,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So yeah, there wasn't the pad market was not what it is today,
Right.
and so I was trying mostly smaller, flatter pads, and that didn't really get me where I wanted to go. But then when I tried I think alpha pads were actually what I tried first, and I tried alpha pads and then the ZMF pads, and after that I realized, oh, okay, yeah, this makes a big difference and opens up some more possibilities for what I could potentially get. But anyway, so after the headphone meet, I kind of in my head now I had a taste of what all the high end all the high end headphones were, and I had kind of a better idea of what sound I wanted to get, and so I kind of kind of mashed together all of my tuning preferences from the head time, from at least from memory, and strive to get as close as I could to that. And after messing with him for probably another month or two, something like that, I finally something kind of clicked, and it's like, okay, now I have the sound I really enjoy, and I think I might be on to.
We're losing a bit of it's jumping around a bit here. I think there's a network issue.
Oh, hopefully not. I'm on a wired connection, thankfully.
Oh.
But it could be. Let me see a second. Will it cut out if I change mics midstream?
Oh, you can do that. The stream won't cut out. You can go ahead and make all those fixes. But I just want to give a bit of context to what the mod is, what the T50 mod is. Basically, what a lot of people are doing and have done for a while is they've taken what is essentially a fairly inexpensive headphone. They just bought it, and then they've improved it. There's a whole market for this where they've improved the tuning and just improved it in various different ways. And then this has resulted in ultimately a headphone that sounds quite a bit better than what the default one is. And then the idea is to then sell that modded headphone for more money, so that you cover the costs of buying the headphones. And so this is how a lot of these other manufacturers like ZMF and Dan Clark have all gotten their start as well. So
basically, it's letting you dictate how you want to hear things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the T50s are really flexible in terms of how much you can change the frequency response. I think that's really their strongest point. That if you're dedicated enough, you can get just about any tuning you like out of them. At least as far as frequency response goes. You just have to have a lot of patience and tried a lot of different pads, a lot of different damping materials, and eventually I think most people could get something that they're happy with. But as far as the modding business, yeah, you're making a tuning that you like, and then when other people decide that they like it, they're basically paying you for your time so that they don't have to figure out how to achieve the sound that they want themselves. So it's like if I spent 300 hours trying to tune these the way I like them, then other people don't, they'll pay me to buy them instead of
time
themselves. Mm-hmm.
So how many, just if you could ballpark it, how many custom headphones have you made, or modded headphones have you made? Let's say just with the T50 mod.
Let's see. Jeez. We did the Mark IIs for about a year, and then the supply ran out. And then we had about a 6 month. It took me about 6 months to figure out how to recreate it with the Mark IIIs. I actually haven't counted in a while, but somewhere between, I'll say over 1,000.
Jeez. Over 1,000 modded headphones.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And so now you're on the Mark III, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you still have a ton of orders coming in, and business is good.
It's really exceeded my expectations for sure. At first I thought it would just be a few here and there. And the first, I'd say the first year or two, it was that. But I would say definitely the last year, it's been pretty steady, and especially the last couple of months, it's picked up. But especially since Christmas to this year, I would say. Um,
What was it like the first time when you realized that there's demand for the tuning that you're kind of slaving over for yourself? You know, when you was it building up kind of like through the grassroots community stuff where you'd go to a meet and then somebody would try it and then there's some hype starts to build. Was it kind of like that?
Yeah, I mean it's a humbling experience. It's a very flat. You do something for yourself, and then you don't stop at the time anyway. I wasn't thinking, well, maybe maybe a lot of other people too, but then I guess I realized that once I was happy with, maybe I was a tougher critic on myself than what other people are. I don't know. But
Usually how that goes.
once a lot of people, sorry.
Usually how that goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the first meet that I took them to was probably the Long Island meet in 2016, I think 2017. Again, I'm not certain on the year. And yeah, I remember the first guy that gave me his impression. He looked at me and was like, "Wow, I like these better than my Thunder Pants." And I don't know if either of you guys remember Smeggy Thunder Pants or not.
Yeah.
But besides Zach and Dan, that was like the first kind of commercial T50 mod, at least that I can remember.
That's right. There were. I remember there was a number that there was like the Mad Dog stuff, and then there were, and those are the other ones.
Yeah, I think again, someone should correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Thunder Pants actually were the first commercial mod. I think.
Right.
And then and Dan wasn't and Dan came after that. And I think the LFF Paradox, and then I think it was Zach after that.
Right.
But yeah, and so yeah, obviously I was inspired by all those guys. But yeah, just getting that first positive feedback is just it's a very good feeling. It's very flattering.
Cool. And I mean, now you're still refining, right? You're still like all the way from that initial kind of breakthrough to now. It hasn't been like, okay, this is now done. It's like still figuring out, still tinkering, and getting it to. I mean, you've now, like you said, you released the Mark III not too long ago, right? So I imagine that process is still, or that process of getting the tuning right to the way that you like it is still the most fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Trying, doing experiments, testing all sorts of different stuff. That's what I enjoy the most personally.
Yeah.
Trying new things, experimenting with new stuff. And yeah, there were some small tuning changes between the Mark II and the Mark III. The biggest complaint I would say that I got on the Mark IIs was probably about the treble. That most T50 mods, or at least Mark II T50 mods, had sort of a treble peak between 8 and 10 kilohertz around there, and some people found that a little fatiguing. Excuse me. So on the Mark IIIs, part of the issue with the change between the Mark II and the Mark III was the dampening on the driver, and so we knew we'd have to change that. And as part of that change, I was able to get rid of that treble peak.
Right, and you're doing all this by ear, right?
Ear and measurements.
Which what are you using for measurements?
You're gonna laugh here. I'll get some flack from this, but I'm using a homemade rig.
You're using a homemade rig?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because like industry standard rigs are like at minimum 15 grand. Like I wouldn't expect you to have a.
Yeah, I would love to get an industry standard rig. And I'm interested in looking at stuff like I saw. I think Critical was doing something interesting with.
So I'm looking into doing that as well.
Oh, great.
The concern that I have with that is there's no compensation for it yet. And people who don't know how to read frequency response graphs and don't know what a raw graph should look like, looking at that's gonna potentially throw them off.
Sure. And
I as much as like the benefit of like being able to show more accurately than what this rig behind me, the VRM's covering it, but more accurately than the ears rig, I feel like is kind of outshined or outshone by the fact that you can't assume that the people who are viewing it are going to understand how to how to read it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, you said that it's a little bit funny that you use a homemade rig, but I've seen like major companies use the MIDI DSP ears rig as a measurement tool as well, and they're not claiming that it's accurate. They're just using it to get a general sense relative to other stuff that measures that they're measuring on it as well, which is still a little bit all over the place. But it's at the very least there's some sort of reference there, at least below 2K hertz or something like that. So
it's more about comparing differences than it is about. So
exactly.
So you can see what you're getting an inaccurate picture, but then if you can compare two inaccurate things, you get kind of an idea of what changed it.
Yeah, you get a relative sense. Yeah. Somebody's mentioning in the comments Lawton. Was that the company? The Lawton pads?
Lawton did make pads. I don't think I tried those. Maybe I did. It's been a while.
I remember I was gonna buy them for the Denon D2000 like way back.
Oh yeah.
I remember there was like one that you could get that would be good for that series. But
I haven't tried them, but he's really big. All the Fostex TH series, the Denon. And he makes some pretty nice looking cups. I know he makes pads as well and tuning kits. I haven't tried them personally.
I need to try more pads with like the ZMF stuff. I know Tyler's into pad swaps and stuff as well. It's fun because I'm super used to just EQing stuff, and I'm totally happy to do that with. I'm using an EQ'd Elegio right now, but I like the idea of achieving the frequency response that you want, or even not just the frequency response, but the character that you're looking for by changing the pads.
Sure.
Because not only is it a simpler way of doing it, you also you get a little bit more confidence that what you've done with the pads, right, is and to say you're not going to do any kind of EQ, it's like, okay, this is just how it's going to be, because maybe you want it to be a little bit different, and then changing the pad is like, all you'd be able to do there. But I kind of like that idea, and I want to do more of it. It's just that I don't always have access to all the pads. Although increasing the collection of you can't there you can see it. It's growing. so we got some more pads, but not quite on the level of Zeos.
Yeah, I remember one time he brought like a gun case full of pads.
But actually, did you see the ZMF new ZMF chart for all the pads? They just posted it, I think.
No, I didn't.
Either today or yesterday. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't.
Yeah. Well, it's the one that they have in the booklet, actually. Yeah. That they gave away at the show. This one here.
Oh, I didn't even look through that.
Yeah.
Because how many different varieties is he up to now?
I don't know. There's so many.
It's got to be over 20, I would think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Tyler, did you get a chance to try the Veritate suede pads yet? I know Anthony said that he ordered some.
Yes, the non-perf, I do have them, I believe.
No, the Veritate suede.
Perforated or non-perforated?
I'm not sure. I don't remember. I need to see. That's the thing, is like I just I need them all.
Yeah, there's a lot. Honestly, like so it kind of goes back to what you were talking about before about the doing EQ versus pad swapping, or like hard mod versus electronic mod. I'm more of the fan of doing the pad swapping over doing EQ myself. So that's where I would fall into. And so for me, I usually, to lead into the answer, I usually find what I like the most, and then once I do, I tend to let them gather dust, if that makes sense. But yeah, so like I think I've tried a bunch of them, and to me, personally, I like the I didn't like the suede as much as I like the Tour for the VCs, the Tour solids, and then for the Veritate opens, I prefer the either the perforated suede or the what else do I have on there? I think right now I have the actual universal lamb skin perforated. Those are my two favorites.
See, what I was really interested to learn from that chart was that, and even just talking to Zach, was the impacts of pads that you can't get just from an EQ.
Yeah.
Things like, for example, if you have thicker pads and it actually physically moves the driver further away from your ears, especially with headphones that don't have the same kind of clamp force for all, like the ZMF ones, it's a bit more kind of like free form on the side of your head. So if you have thicker pads, it is going to move it further away. Whereas if you have it closer, you notice the speed characteristics of the driver more, those types of things. Which, I don't know, I'll let you chime in on that.
But and that's the part that why I think I personally prefer like the pad swapping mods versus EQ and that kind of stuff, because you get natural, I guess is a good term for it, a natural way that it's interfering is a true way of saying it, but like the way it's it's the sound waves, or it's that's to me is it doesn't, you're not messing with it overtly in a way that will affect things in a different layer, like with EQ that I've noticed. Like on EQ, you'll tweak one thing, and next thing you know, the mids are all jacked up. You have to kind of figure out, you have to constantly go through it and figure it out until you get what you need or what you're looking for. But even then, it always seems like there's something off to me, anyways. Whereas when I do like pad swaps, or in fact, I actually bought your HD 700 mod way back when I first started, and so stuff like that, like I've noticed it wasn't as it felt more like, I'm going to stick to the word natural for now, but it just seemed more natural. It seemed like it had a better way of controlling the sound that you wanted, I guess. And so that's kind of where I was kind of sticking to for that kind of thing. And with the different pad density, I think that's a big part of it too. So the way that
the phone makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And then the way for closed backs, I think that's the other part that's interesting is the material used in the back of the cup for the reverb is that can make a huge difference, which is really interesting. Which I thought is kind of another factor. Like I also have the HD 800 with the SDR mod, but taking that into account, the HD 820s I thought are like, one reason I really liked that headphone was not necessarily because of the sound, but because of how much they went into essentially modding the HD 800 into a closed back, and then getting that Gorilla Glass. Like if you actually like,
it's beautiful.
Like, right, and then like the way that they engineered the glass to be, I think it's concave, to reflect the sound into the dampening materials, like just so you can have the visual. It's just crazy. It's such a cool thing that they did.
It's a really cool design. It looks really neat.
So,
do you have one behind you, Tyler?
Which one, the HD 820 or the?
Yeah.
No, I never actually ended up buying it. I had these bad boys, and then it was too close to the HD 800 SDR mod for me to justify, if that makes sense.
So what I wonder though about that is, like, if you were to do something like change the pads on here, would it be able to quote unquote fix the frequency response, like the 300 hertz? I mean, not that it's totally out of whack, but there's 300 hertz gap, and what I wonder is, and this is something that I wanted to actually ask Axel Grell and didn't get a chance to because my camera ran out of battery, but like with the HD 820, in theory, there was going to be a gap somewhere. When I was talking with Max about this as well, there was going to be that, because there needed to be it was being directed at some specific point, and that frequency was just dropped to avoid the resonance. And in theory, they could have put that anywhere. And I wonder if there would have been a more strategic place to put it than 300 hertz.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what range of frequencies they felt they could have put it into. I don't know for sure, but I would suspect that it would be a range probably between, I don't know, maybe 50 and 500 hertz, something like that.
But you and I were talking about this at the show, but there's maybe not to the degree that the HD 820 has a cut at 300 hertz. But if it were possible to put it at somewhere like 3K hertz or just above 3K hertz, where
nice.
There's a strategic reason to have it there. Yeah. It's just, thinking out loud, but
sure. yeah. If you could do that, if they could get it, then I would definitely agree. That would be a good strategic put it for sure.
But there's going to be physical limitations to where you could put it as well, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I don't know the particulars of their design, but I would suspect, based on my experience, that it would be somewhere in the lower mids that they would be limited. And it's just a matter of, well, where is at least in the range that we can hit it, where is it least offensive?
Right. And so they probably did pick the one that was least offensive for, I mean, maybe like 150 hertz, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the other one. But how do you...
Yeah, that would have been better.
I was going to ask you, because there's been a debate in... I mean, I asked you this at the show as well, and we talked about it, but there's been this somewhat of a debate that started by Sean Olive, but whether or not all the technical stuff, like detail, what we call detail resolution, is embedded somehow in the frequency response. Not necessarily something where you could, point at the graph and say, this is where the detail is, but that it is all technically still captured by a frequency response graph. It's just that we don't know what we're looking for. I wanted to get your take on that kind of debate.
Well, I feel personally, I kind of between the objectivist and the subjectivist arguments, usually on average. But I pretty much always will default to my own experience beyond measurements. I don't think because we don't know what we're looking for doesn't mean that that it's not there. I think if we experience it, that's more important than if we're measuring it. I mean, measurements are, when we're measuring the things that we know about and we can measure, then that's going to be more reliable than human ears. But of course, everyone hears differently too, of course. But if there's something that we don't know how to measure, I fall back on my own experience and the experience of other people over the measurements. Whether it's all captured in, I don't know. I mean, I guess there's two ways to look at it, right? I mean, you could say on one hand, if we do a sine sweep and we take the measurement, that all the data that we need to know is captured in that measurement somewhere. We just don't know how to parse the data in a way that will make it clear what's going on as far as detail and stuff goes. And then I guess the other way to look at it would be, well, if we can't see anything, if we don't know what we're looking for and we can't see anything that correlates to what people are experiencing, then that's placebo. We don't know what that is. That may or may not be anything, and that what we can measure is really all that there is. And I would certainly fall in the former that.
Yeah,
just because I don't know. Yeah, just because we don't know what we're looking for it's not there.
This was your wonderful quote that I keep stealing and using at much at your expense. But it's like trying to define the terrain by looking at the map rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
To me, what we call detail, or the thing that, as Tile described, lets us peer into the music better, when you're comparing different headphones. To me, at the moment, I can only really ascribe this to a whole bunch of different factors kind of coming together to give that perception. And one of them is absolutely frequency response. And probably the primary one is going to be frequency response.
Yep.
The other elements, I feel it is probably possible to isolate them and reduce them to certain things. It's just that because the experience is a cohesive mesh of all these different things, it's impossible to really pull apart. So like it's as if, trying to isolate the granular, on a granular level, what this stuff would be is impossible. Yet there is still something that redounds to what the overall experience ends up being that we can then call detail. Now, so on that subject, and I asked you this at the show as well, but if you could, let's say a limitation of the T50 driver is detail, like it fits a certain kind of price bracket where it would maximize. If you could release a headphone that would be like $1,600 or something like that was based on, just like pick a price tag, right? What type of driver would you or what type of basis foundation would you use for that headphone, whether planar or dynamic or whatever?
So I take it kind of the spirit of the question. What type of driver do I think is most technically capable as far as detail retrieval?
So then that you would, I mean, even something that is appropriately moldable for the frequency response that you want, because I mean, even like the highest end planar magnetic headphones that we have available, none of them actually have a reasonable frequency response. Well, I shouldn't say none of them, but most of them, there's something weird with the frequency response, and they're trying to improve it over time. I think probably the closest would be the Susvara, but beyond that, I mean, all these other crazy flagship headphones out there, very few of them I've found, in spite of the fact that they get the technical stuff incredibly, it's super impressive, the frequency response isn't as meticulously done as what a lot of the modders are doing with lower end drivers and lower end foundations, let's say. So yeah, I'll let you answer the question.
Oh boy. Well, I mean, I guess on one hand I would say, at least in my experience, planars are more flexible than dynamics in terms of modding. I mean, as far as tuning the frequency response goes. But that's the nature of the design of the driver. You look at a dynamic driver, usually like the back of the magnet structure it's already got some dampening there. It's already kind of defined. Like if I was designing a dynamic driver from the ground up, there's a lot more I could do. But if I was taking an existing dynamic driver, I would be more limited with what I could do as far as tuning goes. I'd be more. I would be focusing more on pads in the baffle and the cup design than with dampening on the driver. Whereas with the planar, it'd be almost the opposite. Where, well, not necessarily the opposite, but I would be focusing a lot on the dampening of the driver on a planar compared to a dynamic. As far as what planar that would be, though, that's a good question. What I'm going to do next is still up in the air. Something I've been thinking about a lot, which way I want to go.
Have you had a chance to experiment with, or not experiment, but try out the Meze Empyrean, or look into what they were doing with that isodynamic hybrid array thing?
I've seen it, and I've tried I tried it at where was it? Gosh, I think it would have been CanJam last year.
Yeah.
I don't think I tried it this year, but yeah, I have tried it before, and I enjoy it. And I think it's a neat design. Yeah, it's I guess what their pitch is that the different shapes of the magnet and traces make different parts of the diaphragm better at producing different frequency range.
Yeah, which makes a certain amount of sense in theory.
Yeah, like it makes logical sense to me. I guess I would love to see something like a not slow motion, but some sort of. I'd like to see an experiment where they take the same shape driver, same basic parameters, and say, well, here's what it would look like if we didn't do that versus what it looks like when we have done.
Right.
And how much of a difference, if they're saying different parts of the diaphragm reproduce different parts of the frequency range better, what does that look like in real time? Like, does one part of the surface vibrate differently than the other? Is it something that you could see if you had, like, I don't know, a super high speed camera and an electron microscope or something?
That would be really interesting to do. To hook up a super high speed camera to different driver types. Or like the high end like dynamics, like beryllium drivers, to see the difference there. If it's even captured by, I know that the super high speed cameras are getting better and better, but from what I understand, the restorative force on a lot of that stuff's pretty crazy.
I think there's simulations that different companies have done. I think I've seen some of like the diaphragm movement on the boundary. I guess they call it like the boundary condition of where the diaphragm meets the surround. How the diaphragm flexes. I think Focal has shown some stuff with that.
That's
with how their new stuff compares to a traditional like mylar diaphragm.
Oh yeah, I've seen that where that's the one where they show the driver breakup.
I think so.
I think I've seen that one. But yeah, I mean, the reason I bring up the Empyrean is, to me, it's almost as if they looked at the principles of a dynamic driver and said, let's see if we can do something like this in a planar. As in, like a dynamic driver, not all, but like the stuff like Focal, where you have this sort of more hybrid kind of system. The outside of the driver, you have handling, well, basically the stiffness and rigidity for the center for high frequencies and the outside for lower frequencies. And you get the nice result of that is you get really good slam and punch and impact, right, from the excursive qualities. Which again, I was talking with Max about this, and like it seems like there's no real consensus there either, especially when it comes to planars, because we were talking with Sankar at the show, and he's like, the LCD1, which is this tiny little headphone, has the same flux as the LCDX, so we don't know.
That's crazy.
Yeah, like it's like I have no idea how it shows up in planars, but anyways, just getting back to the CanJam stuff. What was your highlight from the show this year?
I'd say for closed headphones, I'd say the Veritate closed. And for open, I'd say probably DMS's Diana's. I also like the AB1266. A lot of this, I missed out on a lot of stuff. I spent more time talking to people than trying gear this year.
That's how I felt too.
But there's a lot of good stuff out there for sure.
Yeah.
I also like the AB1266, the Empyrean, the Sosfora. Most of the higher end hi-fis. I enjoy the Aria. I like a lot.
Yeah, the Aria that's like, if I had like the people ask me this all the time, like, if you could pick one open back headphone and one closed back headphone, what would you pick? And my answer for the closed back is the Veritate closed, even though I don't own one. And I own the open. I kind of have a sense of how that sounds, and that kind of sound in a closed back, it would be awesome.
Yeah.
And the Hi-Fi Aria is the open back, and partially because, well, they're both flagships, but also partially because I think they complement each other really well for differently recorded music. The Aria it's a little bit more neutral, bright, and the Veritate is a bit more. I don't want to say neutral because it has a bit of that sort of upper mid range coloration there, but it is a little bit more like gentle downslope, as Zach likes to describe, depending on the pads, of course, that you use, right? So.
Yep.
What was your preference for pads with the Veritate closed?
I only tried it with one, and I think it was, what was the default on it? What is the default now? Is it the
Tour? Yeah.
The Tour non-perforated though, right?
Non-perforated Tour.
Okay.
So they come with the Universe non-perforated also.
Okay. Because I've tried the regular Veritate with the Universe and with the Veritate, and my preference for the Veritate is probably pads. But I haven't tried all the different variations.
Sorry, which pads were that?
Oh, sorry, the Universe pads.
Right.
For the regular Veritate. For the Veritate close, I only tried.
Yeah, Tours. The BE2 is really good for the Veritate.
That's what I have right now on mine. BE2.
They're fun. Just because they.
And what is that?
It's a lot more forward.
Yeah, they're like a thinner pad.
Okay.
It not quite. Sorry, I'll let Tyler talk and just show these off.
No worries.
These ones.
And then there's the Veritate. They're kind of similar to the Veritate pads, like the original Veritate pads, which is slimmer, but I think they have a slightly slimmer profile and more universal slimness to them. And then is that right?
No, the default Veritate are flatter. So they're not these are a little bit chunkier, a little bit thicker. In between the Veritate and the Universe, but at the same time the Veritate ones are also a little bit wider. They're a bit like long.
Openings different.
It's a bit wider still. And the sound profile difference is that you get the frequency response is actually a lot more similar to the Universe suede, but then you still retain the technical benefits of not all, but to a certain extent, the regular Veritate pads, which to me, so like the end result is that your stage gets smaller and more forward. Everything just sort of comes a little bit more forward. But then it's kind of like what happens with the Focal Clear, right? Where like you get tons of detail, you notice the technicalities of the driver a little bit more. At least that's what the kind of stuff Zach was telling me at the show. And so I tend to go back and forth. Oh yeah, is that gonna
At the tower of pads.
Yeah. Oh my god. Oh my. You just like smush them together. Oh my god. That's crazy. That needs to be in like the thumbnail of this live stream.
And that's the new hybrid. Like, no, it's like focusing on this. Really
Is that Veritate hybrid?
Yeah.
I didn't know it had hybrids.
So from Zach, yeah, it's an interesting one. It's
oh my god, dude.
So is it the ear surface that's the suede, or is it the inside?
So in the surface.
Okay.
It's not focusing for some reason.
You gotta hold it next to your face.
Yeah. But the suede here, and then perforated lamb, and then solid.
Okay.
So,
I just need to buy more ZMF stuff and then just like include it in whatever they send me. Just like all the pads, please. Just put everything.
I would imagine that would really help you do too. I mean, if you're trying to guide people towards what sound they can achieve with them, there's so many different ones.
Well, Zach,
correction real quick, it's not perforated on the inside, so it actually has.
Yeah, that's the suede solids, right?
Yeah,
the Veritate suede solids. Yeah. Zach told me he was going to send me at some point a Veritate close to review. But it's challenging because as Metal was saying, it's like they're constantly making them for customers, right? So there's never one that's not being used or made for somebody.
Trying to get the pads to focus. I don't know why.
Oh yeah, so you can see that one's quite a bit thinner.
Yeah, so that's a BE2.
Yeah.
And it has a more. I want to say it's a more circular, or is it? Circular opening. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not as wide in the back as the Veritate pads, which I have right here, actually. Ha!
Side by side.
Veritate pads. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I wish she had a way to label the pads.
Actually, that would be really nice.
He's working on it. He's actually creating a tag for him. Is what I remember him. Trying to do so. But what I do is I just take come on, play nice. But I take the card that comes with them and I just stick them in there so that I can.
Oh, okay.
So this is the Verite and this is the B2, so you can kind of.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, pretty close, but it's kind of like in between the universe and the.
Yeah, and then as far as openings, you can kind of see that the B2 is slightly opener, more open. It's so.
Yeah. But yeah, I was gonna ask about the. Well, I'm sure we'll get back to the ZMF stuff, but I wanted to ask about your experience of DMS's Diana Phi. As a modder, how does something like that strike you when somebody? Did you get a chance to try the original Diana Phi or like compare them side by side?
No, I didn't, unfortunately. I think I heard the original Diana V1. I want to say 2 years ago, something like that. So yeah, I didn't have a good side by side comparison. What I really liked about it was, I liked how dynamic it was, planar, especially considering the size. And the frequency response I thought was really good, really fun. Again, I don't feel comfortable giving detailed impressions because it was a really loud environment and I didn't have anything to compare them to. But yeah, I really enjoyed them. I think I saw that they did add them to their site. I think that they added an option that you can.
But that's Well, I was going to ask about this because they added the option to have the DMS pad, which, as he was telling me, is it's. I'm sure you saw this, but basically, I'll just demonstrate on the ZMF pad. So if you imagine this is the top of the pad here. He took a bunch of material out of the top, so that when you have it on your head, it doesn't kind of push into the temples because the way that headphone sits on your head, it doesn't actually fit the side of your head. It kind of just hangs down. So he made it so that it fits more kind of the way that normal headphones fit. But then he also did a number of other changes to the not to the driver necessarily, but to the covering, the protective covering.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to actually ask you about this because so far from a certain amount of experience with this kind of stuff, it seems like the more stuff you put in between the driver and the ear, the less detail comes through.
Yep.
And so in theory, removing that, I mean, I know also that the guys from Abyss said that they doing this doesn't actually change the detail retrieval all that much.
Mm-hmm.
And he may have done other things as well. I'd love to get actually the full rundown on what it was exactly that he did. But from what I understand, they won't actually do that part of the mod because they don't want to risk damage to the headphone, which is completely understandable. You got to have, like detail at all costs, but still make sure that people aren't sticking their fingers in the driver and breaking stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you don't want. Yeah, they wouldn't want to spike their RMA rates or anything.
Yeah. Especially since that's one of the main features is that it's a headphone that'll last longer than you do.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, what's your take on the front cover stuff?
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that front side damping is something I try and avoid whenever possible. That's, I mean, sure, you're going to change the frequency response, and I think perceived detail does definitely change with frequency response. But there's, to me at least, in my experience, there seems to be something more than, like, if you were to, let's just say for the sake of argument, you put a piece of felt in front of the drum, and that lowers your treble that, let's say, 2 or 3 dB, and then you were to EQ that treble back up,
right?
I think you'd still hear something missing.
So like with the Dan Clark Audio, like the filters that they have, like the kind of foam felt kind of stuff where you can insert it into the headphone and it curbs the highs, you do lose a bit of detail when you do that as well, a bit of potential performance that the headphone has.
That's my perception.
It's interesting when you look at something like this, the Veritate Pad. This is this material here is also somewhat thick. It makes me wonder what would happen if, I don't know, maybe Tyler can mod one of his pads and tell me what happens. But if you were to remove this
the felt or the
it's
inner
not
layer.
Yeah, it's not like I've had stuff that's thicker than that, right? But compared to like what they had on the Diana-Fi, that DMS removed, that's thinner on the Diana-Fi than this. Okay. So like I wonder. I mean, he removed that, and it was basically a naked driver there, from what I could tell. And I wonder how the Veritate would sound if you, or something like the Veritate, if you just removed that part as well. If it would improve the technical performance. I'm tempted to experiment.
Well, there's I think there's materials out there that you can use that is a lot more acoustic. What's the term? The acoustic where sound waves pass through it freely. There's material so it's also dust proof, but also lets audio. But it's, I'm trying to think of the material. Someone was talking about recently too, and I can't think of what it was.
But super thin, like something.
Super thin, yeah. It's like it's basically complete clear. Like it doesn't block any sound waves supposedly, but it's ridiculously thin. So, because anything you put in between that, and it's obviously going to have some factor in it, depending on the what's the term for it? It's a term for like the way the sound waves pass through material. It's a term.
Acoustically transparent.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I think is what you're probably looking for is what kind of material are they using, and is there a reason they're using that level, like, because there's different levels of it, right? So
Sure.
So maybe there's a reason for it. I wouldn't be curious to do that mod. Maybe that is
put that instead of the default, foam kind of thing.
I mean, because at the end of the day, the biggest thing you're worried about is the obviously more dust, right? Getting dust on your drivers. Which is more a factor for planars than it is. I mean,
right. That's the other thing is that like with the dynamics. I mean, if you look at even the Focal drivers, like it's also kind of just like a naked driver there, right? Like you have if you just look, I can't really show it here, but like if you just peer into it, it's more of like a grill that they have, and not actually any material foam there or anything.
It's a similar thing that they have on the HD800, which I think is that material I'm thinking of. It's it's the material that's actually covering the driver rather than the material. Is that so? If you ever open up an HD800, it has that.
It's like a really thin metal mesh.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what
so maybe that was what they were using on the Abyss Diana-Fi, because it looks different from what it looks like what you just described, kind of like a thin metal mesh.
Yeah,
So maybe
it's made out of like a plastic or something else though, but it's it's like a very metal like look to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say in my experience, stuff like a thin fabric or even a thin open cell foam doesn't have too much of an impact. But when you start getting into like the felts, that's where you start to really notice the difference.
Like diffusion, right? Because that's a factor, right? When they get into like the way that it kind of like you get like the sound panels, right? Because it has the way that it goes through the.
It's funny because when I was interviewing Fang Bian from Hi-Fi Man, and I was asking him about potential changes that were done to some of the headphones, and he told me that the only real changes were, they used to put black paint on the magnets to make it look nice and to make it fit with the aesthetic they were going for, and then they, for whatever reason, the black paint would like peel off. So then they changed that. Instead of doing that, I think they changed the color of the dust cover. And that's all they did. They changed the color of the dust cover, from what I understand. And then I think for the Aria, they actually affixed it. So it's a little bit different there as well. But and then he said you might actually notice that there's a change in the frequency response as a result of that. Because they're so sensitive. The nanoscale diaphragms are so sensitive to change in parameters for anything that's going on with the assembly, even something as basic as not painting the magnets and changing the color of the dust cover. So, I'm sure they would have changed some sort of material there as well, probably. But yeah,
that's pretty sensitive.
Very sensitive to that kind of stuff, apparently. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, I try and avoid frontside damping. I don't think I've ever released anything with frontside damping. I've tried it a bunch of times. With some headphones that have really bad peaks, I think it can be useful as a cheap and easy fix. But in general, I think I will try and do everything that I can before even considering frontside damping.
So would you then say that like the biggest or the parameter that you would change that has the biggest impact on the frequency response would be the pads?
Probably, yeah. I would say on average. I guess I should say if you take two different pads that are extremely different, that's going to have a bigger impact on frequency response than almost anything else.
Right.
There's changes you can make. Again, it depends a lot on what headphone you're talking about. But like on the T50 Mark IIIs, if you don't seal the baffle, the bass is going to suffer no matter what pad you use.
Right.
So I go to a decent bit of effort to make sure the ear side volume, I should say, is sealed. So there's changes you can make with baffles and cups and stuff, but besides the driver, probably the pads are probably the biggest thing.
Right.
Because you're changing it probably makes as big or bigger of a difference than the room in speech.
Right.
I think that's probably a good analogy.
Yeah, that's actually
and it's almost like you're moving from, if you go from something like, let's say like the ZMF ovals. Let me see if I have something else smaller. See, I've got like some Taconi TH900 pads, but the difference between those two pads probably bigger than, say, that's like going from like an apartment to an amphitheater, in terms of difference. Maybe that's a little extreme, but you know what I mean? There's that is the environment that the sound is interacting with you between the driver and your ear, and it's gonna have probably as much or more impact than your average. It's gonna have bigger impact than, say, like treating your room versus not treating your room, or having a room with good acoustics or a good layout versus a bad layout. It can pretty dramatically change the function.
And so with that, what would you say is a ideal? I know you often look for, what you like. That's what you listen. You're trying to mod it for. But what that ends up looking like, is there a target curve that you think it gets close to? Let's say, the common ones would be diffuse field and Harman. Like, where would you say your preference fits in between those two? Harman from like 2017.
The pre bass boost.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I'm
I
sure
think
there's other changes too.
yeah, but I think at this point it's fairly safe to say that the degree of bass boost for Harman is just a bit much, and I think it's colored by consumer preferences to the to a bad degree. Like, yes, that's the whole point. I get it, but at the same time, I think I think there are too many influences that are boosting the bass for that.
Yeah, I think it's going to vary. So my music preference is usually either like EDM or like acoustic or jazz, that kind of thing. It depends totally what kind of mood I'm in. And if I'm listening to EDM, or I don't really listen to pop much anymore, but back when I did, I kind of want that bass boost, and I feel like and maybe I'm a closet bass head, I don't know, but you know, it takes quite a bit of bass boost to get anything approaching the physical sensation that you would get from bass, like in a speaker setup, like with a subwoofer. To get that kind of physical sensation with headphones takes quite a bit of bass boost. But if you're listening to like natural music recordings, then you're not going to want that bass boost. So I think it's understandable that there would be kind of more consumer-facing tunings where you really actually do want the bass boost, even if it is overblown. But then if you start listening to audio recordings with that, really you want to start looking at different headphones more than anything else, probably. So I actually, for EDM and pop, I don't mind the bass boost. But for audiophile music, I would agree with you.
Serious audiophile music.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned it, because I actually think I was listening to the Head Audio Tower Mains. This was after Can Jam that same weekend. They took us to the recording studio, and we got to listen to the Tower Mains.
Oh wow! Oh,
and
nice.
It was a good room, but they had it so that there was a chair in the middle of the room where it was like optimal position for where where you're gonna get the best positioning and everything. Sure. And I remember thinking, okay, there is too much bass here. But I realized that a lot of that was the music that they were playing. It wasn't necessarily that the speakers themselves were, I bet if you played serious audiophile music on it, it would actually sound pretty good. It's just that the music that happened to be playing was it was like EDM or some sort of dubstep at the time. And they would change it. They would go through different tracks. But the one that I happened to be listening to when I was sitting there was this massive bass track. And I went, Jesus, if we're trying to tune headphones to this, we're missing the mark by a long shot, because stuff that has these crazy bass shelves, it needs to be even higher. But no, to me it was definitely influenced by what specific music it was and what tracks we were listening to. So
sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something where if I'm listening, let's say I'm listening to EDM, I just want a good beat. I want to feel the bass and I want to have a nice beat, and so I'm not paying attention to the negative aspects of having that bass boost. I might know that they're there, but in the moment, it's not something I really care about too much.
It's funny because there's this. You just mentioned that you're never going to get that same physical sensation that you feel when there is a lot of bass. You physically feel the vibrations from speakers, and in headphones you're not going to get that. But I wonder if one of the attractive elements of having a bass shelf, like a substantial bass shelf, is the association with that sound and the feeling that you get, even if you're not getting that feeling.
Yep. Exactly.
And that's why people are cranking up, or producing headphones that crank up the bass. It's giving you a part of that because you're used to that.
Yes. Yeah. I think so. It's kind of tricking your brain into getting into that memory.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But yeah, I would agree. As ramping up the bass, you're obviously going to get to a point where you want an all-rounder, but you can only have so much bass in an all-rounder headphone. And you're going to start noticing the negative aspects of that. It's going to start bleeding into the mix. It's going to sound woolly. It depends on the driver, but yeah. And that's something. Oh, go ahead.
So for your preference, like the tuning that you end up with for your headphones, you'd say it. Would you say it leans more towards a Harman type of sound signature, or what do you kind of aim for?
Well, so when I first did the Argons, like I said, I had no target curve in mind. It was just simply by ear what I thought I enjoyed. And with the Mark IIIs, it was, well, the Mark II, I can't make the Mark IIs anymore, and there's still pent up demand of people who want that sound. So I want to try and reproduce that sound with the Mark IIIs,
right?
And continue doing that. But then that's a big question for me moving forward. I think there's, if I were going to be moving up the stack, so to speak, if I'm going to be moving up in price, then I think I could be, this is my suspicion anyway, is that the higher end the headphone that you get, the higher the percentage of people are going to be listening to serious audiophile music and not pop, EDM, not the modern genres. And so I think a tuning that better suits those genres is going to do better at a higher end, as a higher end product. As far as versus the Harman target, I would say for a higher end headphone, I would not want. I would agree there.
Sorry, you would not want what? Sorry.
I'm sorry. I would not want as much bass as for a higher end headphone.
Yeah.
One thing I keep going back, and I remember mentioning this briefly to you at the show, was that I'm torn about to me, the balance between the upper mids and the lower mids is something that I've really thought about a lot about. And like probably my favorite for that, for the upper mid balance, is probably like the HG 660, 660S. Like I really like the balance between, let's say, the 2 to 4K range versus 1K down. I think most headphones have a little bit of dip from between, like, let's say 1K and 3K on average. But that particular balance, I think, is done really well. The downside with that is that if I were to follow that target, I won't get quite as much of a soundstage effect as I would if I'm continue doing what I'm doing now. So I'm really, one of my areas of focus now, and I don't get a whole lot of time to do R&D, unfortunately, but when I do, one of my areas, okay, how can I bring up the upper mids and the presence region to really improve the quality and focus of the vocal without sacrificing the soundstage? Because that was something that I really noticed early on, was that, like, I love the mids on this, but the soundstage just, to me, feels unnatural. Like, it's just, it's like in my head, babe.
Yeah.
And
have you, just out of curiosity, have you tried the Sundara, like this?
I tried I think it was a pre-production model, or it was one of the the revision. I heard there's a new revision of it.
I guess I sort of I unintentionally blew the whistle on that, or let the cat out of the bag on that one. But yeah, I don't know when this happened, but I think it was in the past, sometime like around a year ago was when they changed the structure to the pads. And Fang assured me that they didn't change the driver or the cup or anything like that, in over a year, at least over a year, 2 years. And the only thing that they did was, after the very first batch, was that they improved the reliability of the driver. But when they said they did change the pad structure, which was the first thing that I noticed when I tried this one compared to the old Sundara that I had reviewed before, I was like, oh, okay, they just have different pads on them, because it was that noticeably different. But apparently it's the same pad, just slightly different. Like the angle is more extreme, so it's not as thick in the front, so it actually improves comfort. But from a frequency response perspective, it's interesting you mentioned the 660S, the Sennheiser, because I have one here right now, and I'm currently evaluating it. I'm going to be doing a comparison with the Sundara, so I'll see how the upper mids are for that. But what you just mentioned about soundstage, I mean, that is what we were talking about at the show, and I think this is like headphones like the Mr. Speaker or the Dan Clark Audio Aeon 2 they're an example of going one way rather than the other, where they don't have the balance quite as nice as what the 660S has or even the Sundara has. But they just, it's like they were like, okay, yeah, we're going to go for soundstage. Like they chose soundstage specifically. And that is fine for like a ton of music that I think is popular these days. Not necessarily the genres, because I've sort of changed my mind on that, but the recording styles that were used for a lot of the current genres. And I think that it's probably fine for that, but then as you were saying, when you start listening to the like serious audiophile music, you start to notice that's lacking a little bit. And so I think that I think for every headphone manufacturer is the biggest challenge. How do you, especially unless you're doing something like ZMF, where you have you have headphones, and actually I bet even for them, like the Veritate, that was probably a challenge there as well, because there's a cut there, absolutely. And I feel like, yes, you can do a certain amount with pads, but that, let's say, frequency response trickery to expand the stage a little bit, I see it so often that I think that's, if everything else is done right, that's what you start to notice. And figuring that out, I still don't know what the answer would be to that.
Yeah, I've wondered. I haven't gotten a chance to try it, but sometime I really want to try the what is it called, the Smythe Realizer.
Oh, that thing looks awesome. Yeah.
I've heard really good things about it. It looks really cool.
I haven't heard of this.
I almost bought one. And then,
oh wow.
And then I was in a very impatient mode when I almost did, and they were like, and I missed, like, there's a window where you can get one when you first announced them, like the most recent one, I want to say.
Okay.
And it was like $500 off, something like that. And then by the time I actually got to go buy it, it was like it jumped up, and I was like, meh.
So are they not selling it anymore, or is it just
I think
like
it's just at that time, and that was when I was actually looking to do stuff like that, and I just never really revisited it.
So what exactly is that?
So it's sort of like, at least my understanding is, it's sort of like a DSP device where they'll, at least the demos that I saw, they would put they basically got a really high-end speaker setup in a room. They'd have the person listen to that speaker setup. They'd put microphones in their ears.
Yeah.
And analyze that recording, use that to then apply DSP to the headphones that it was putting out. So the demo idea would be like, okay, we're going to put you in front of this $100,000 speaker setup, listen to it, then we're going to put some HJ100s on you or some Stax 009s, and it's going to sound as if you were listening to those speakers again.
And they'd switch it. They would have it switched, and people couldn't tell the difference. Like, they would have the headphones on, and they'd switch between and it was this crazy setup where they'd have like them up on racks, and they'd be all around them. The speakers would go on. And like they'd switch it. People would be like, "Wait, am I listening to the headphones or the?"
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's pretty cool how they did.
So like that's like a HRTF like thing where they're trying to.
Yeah.
So that was like I want to say like a few can jams like a few years ago. That was when that first. I remember seeing video of this. Yeah.
So that's when I was looking into doing it, and that's it was like 3 years ago, just shy of 3 years, and so it was pretty crazy.
And I think there's some consumer-facing headphones that are starting to do something sort of like that.
Oh, there's the Neurophone.
Yeah, the Neurophone. Is that the one I'm thinking of? And the Mobius?
Yeah, but the Mobius is a more interesting one. Mobius is like the one that it's more about the head tracking. So if you move, Tyler can explain a little bit more. But
the Smith I think they do something similar with. I think they use the same technology to some degree. I think, from my understanding.
Oh, for the head tracking.
Yeah, I think they did something.
Also, when you move your head, it doesn't like it stays with the same.
Yeah, it's the NX. I can't remember exactly, but it's it's a little chip that basically if you turn your head this way, all the speakers and all the sound stays in its location. So like if I'm sorry, it's kind of hard with the camera here, but if I'm looking at the camera, the sound's coming from here. If I turn my head, the sound stays coming from here. So there's your head moves, but the sound stays, instead of being like headphones where you turn this way and everything moves with you, it stays in its set location.
I don't know if I want that
for video games.
Yeah, that
movie and video game.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. But like for listening to music, like I feel like I turn my head because I have to, not because I want to hear. Because like the other thing you'd be messing with is the angle.
Well, so
right.
for me, the good trick. Do you have the Mobius at all, Andrew?
No, I don't know.
So I know Taryn has it. You can, for me, like I used to have I had my JBLs and desktop monitors, and I'd be listening to my Mobius to music, and I'd forget I was listening to. I forgot I had it on like surround sound, basically with the NX or the head tracking, and my wife and daughter would be sleeping, and I'd be like cranked up music, and I'd be like, I'd turn my head, and I'd be like, oh crap, my speakers are on. My wife's gonna come screaming at me, but it was in the headphones. So I think that's for music wise was like the cool factor was like it would replicate a desktop monitor setup, if that makes sense. So,
I need to try that at some point. It sounds like, even just because of it's a cool experience,
Yeah.
And I think those, what the Smythe Realizer, I think is what it's like.
It's what? Sorry, you cut out there for a second.
I think it's like $4,000, something like that. $5,000.
Oh, so that's maybe not even that crazy. Oh, like for the thing that you buy
for
that
the device, yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you have to make an appointment to have your ears measured while you're, when you get one. If you have to, I don't know what the process is.
It's a little bit like the next level, getting ear impressions for custom IEMs.
Yeah.
Similar kind
having
of
your
like
HRTF
personalized.
measured.
Yeah. But in a way, it's like, why not? Like I could see that being the next step. Like if you want to take it to the extreme, to make sure that it's as custom and personalized to you. I mean, as long as again, this is what we were talking about before. As long as you can get, I think the foundation has to be good enough, and as long as you can get the soundstage elements to be there, right? Then I think like the physical kind of soundstage elements, not just the frequency response ones, and then you have something like this where you have the custom HRTF. So sorry for anybody in the chat unaware, high res transfer function, if that's the HRTF, that's the term. I think most people probably know about that. But yeah,
it would be interesting. I know some people have talked about it before too. That at what point are headphones going to be dominated by DSP? And I know for me that's a concern because I know that's one of those things I know I can't compete in. And it'll be interesting to see what happens to the audio headphone market when DSP becomes more advanced, and what if there is some industry standard software that maybe you could go. Imagine if you could go to an audiologist and
head related transfer function, not high res. All right, sorry, I interrupt you there.
Oh no. So I think it'd be pretty cool if we got to a point where you could go to an audiologist, have impressions made for your IEMs, but then also have your HRTF measured and use that with some sort of industry standard software to really get a better experience overall with almost any headphone, whether that's a custom IEM or an over. But is that DSP going to take the form of is it going to be built into the DAC? Is it going to be software you run on your computer, or is it going to be built into your headphones? The headphones are now, is everything going to be wireless Bluetooth with DSP added? Is that going to become the standard?
I think. Go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say eventually, I think so, but I think we still have a long time before then, because I was talking to Fang Bian about this. And he seems to think that, yes, we are on the cusp of everything being wireless. All the amps and DACs are going to be pointless. It's all going to be in the headphones. And I just think, based on the examples that I've heard so far, there's still quite a bit of daylight there between the wired and the wireless. Both from a what's possible with putting source equipment into the headphones, and also as far as Bluetooth. I think Bluetooth has a ways to go. And I think Bluetooth technology is going to get there first. And then once it's there, then I think it'll start to make a little bit more sense to explore that route. But currently, you can, even if you listen to the Ananda Bluetooth, which is probably the best wireless headphone. I don't know, not certainly not the most useful, but for technical performance, let's say.
Sure.
There's still a noticeable difference. I think even the untrained ear would be able to hear a difference, and it's in my mind that's the limitation is Bluetooth right now. And I see eventually it'll probably get there, but I think it's just going to take some time.
Yeah, I think both the Bluetooth, both the audio stream itself as well as what kind of amplifier can you put into the cup of a headphone, and then whether you're making it open and closed. I mean, what are the limitations of having a closed headphone with a amp module inside of it and a battery and all this other stuff? How much is that impacting an already compromised sound?
Yeah,
and I think there's another factor that's kind of not really. Technology's great, and I think you're right. There's going to be a factor where it's going to be people are going to go to the mainstream, and it's going to be that issue, right? But I'm just going to point you to the wonderful resurgence of vinyl in the world. So you know, there's something to be said about having a true analog system. I agree. Know when you hear one that it's just better. Like, I'm sorry, anyone that's a technologist. I'm a technologist to some degree. Like. It's just
there are certain things that the digital one can't do. There's certain qualities about the
So I think that no matter what you're going to have, those people. I mean, look at the hobby, right? Come on, like
sure.
Yeah.
There's no such people are searching for paying thousands and thousands of dollars for that last 5% of quality. I mean, so I don't think that it's going to go away by form. I think it's just going to become more niche and more that kind of thing.
With putting the notion of putting amps or putting source equipment into the headphones, it was interesting to see the Deva, the HiFiMan's new wireless. Now I wasn't the tuning isn't for me, but the way that they did that, I think is promising. Where they didn't put it in the headphone, they attached it to the bottom of the cup. Which makes it so that you don't have to compromise as much. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that because I don't know what's actually going on inside. But the Bluetooth element, that whole section, the receiver section, was at the bottom of the cup. So, like, at the very least, like, some of that is outside of where those types of things would impact the sound. I think that shows promise. I don't know how that would work for like closeback, but I think once again, completely eliminating it from the sonic elements, right, where it would potentially have some impact on the sound. I think there is promise there. And then as far as the DSP goes, I think that's also where they correct the issues that they can't, like the things that when you do make a compromise like that, then there's DSP right at the ready, to fix all of those issues.
I like the way that they did that. I wanted to try it, but for some reason the Bluetooth wasn't pairing with my phone right. But I like how they did that, how they made them external, so you can go from passive to Bluetooth.
Oh, with the Deva.
Yeah. Yeah, so I didn't get a good listen on it, but I like the idea.
I don't think the Deva has DSP, at least not as far as I'm aware. But I'm thinking of like the LCD one closed, for example.
Oh, okay.
Where like the Cypher DSP is going to be kind of part of that, because it's going to be wireless and all this. Which, I mean, that's I just see like eventually that being, if wireless is going to take off, I think DSP also needs to take off. Because that's how you make up some of the concessions that you have to make. Sure,
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think, and I guess with the Onazy stuff, the original Cypher cable, like it has kind of its own default EQ built into it, right? And then it has its own app that you can apply. Yeah. Which device is that?
Oh, lost Tyler's audio here.
Yep, lost your audio. Sorry.
Sorry, I was
there we go.
Typing on the chat.
Yeah.
Okay. It's Hibby's MSEB. So I was talking to Ant was mentioning like the BWF, but that's something similar, like where it's like they do the DSP, but it's very simplified and very. It's not like a true like EQ person. I mean, it is, but it talks about cool, bright, overall temperature, warm.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? Like bass extension is light or deep. Bass texture is fast or thumpy, and so you mix it based on that. Like that's cool. Kind of something to think.
They're simplifing the EQ problem. But that's a good thing, it's one of those things where I bet. I mean,
but then they still have the classic EQ. Where
right, okay, I love that. That's fantastic.
Which you can play with and have all of those.
Yeah, because it's. I mean, I love that they go to the lengths of not just warmer, brighter, right? Like I like thumpy, like, or you know, the things that
Fast,
people like.
thumpy.
I want, yeah, like let's get more, you know, still not as nerdy as like, you know, what we're doing with frequency response, with, you know, getting super picky about that stuff, but more refined and nuanced than just, you know, three options, right?
It's like it says like note thickness, crisp or thick.
Yeah, that's. I mean, who knows? What, like, is this like a DAC filter or something? That
Yeah, it is. That's what it is. So then it has
Yeah.
a voice, but it's all digital though. So it has voice.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
recessed crisp or forward radio edition.
yeah.
Female overtones, intoxicating or detox.
I love those descriptions. It's fantastic.
Yeah, they're kind of ridiculous, but it's
Yeah.
long. There's a whole ton of them. It's not just like that one page I showed you. It's
Yeah.
a large like list of them.
But with the Odyssey stuff, with the reveal DSPs, those are kind of more like what SonarWorks does, where they'll look at a given frequency response curve, and then they'll correct the deviations to match a certain target. And for Odyssey, from what I understand, at least, whether or not they get there, I don't know, but they're trying to hit a certain target with their Reveal Plus DSPs, and then they're trying to base it on specific rooms. So a recording engineer could potentially be like, I want this room in this specific studio or whatever it is, even though they're not there, and it allows them to simulate what that room would sound like.
Okay.
Yeah, it's meant. I mean, the whole idea ahead before the audiophiles got their hands on this stuff, it was meant as at least as far as I understand. Somebody in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was meant as a tool for recording engineers and people who did studio work. And then, you know, I think a lot of us in the audiophile space were like, oh, this sounds way better than what the default tuning is anyways for the headphones, so we might as well use it. And so that's why you have, like, for the LCD1, you have the Reveal Plus that makes it basically a almost perfect Harman tuned headphone. It's a little bit more bright in the treble, like a little bit more treble energy there, but for the most part, it kind of follows the general curve there.
Is their target the same for every headphone, or is it selectable?
Right. So I actually asked Sankar about this. I'll actually release the full interview probably tomorrow. I think he said there's a general, like they generally try and have it be the same. Like from my take is that it's not always possible to get it to be the same, but they'll try and get it to a reasonable similarity there. Not when they're making it specific to a certain room. But so, for example, if you take the Reveal Plus plugin, like just using Equalizer APO with the LCD1, and you use the plugin for that, and then you compare it to using the specific one for the LCD X or the I tried one that was the EL8 titanium, which was totally the wrong headphone, but like you get the idea. You could see what they were trying to correct, right? What they were trying to improve upon. And I don't know, again, it's one of those things where I don't know if that would it feels weird from like a marketing standpoint that you would do something like this, because it's like saying, well, we weren't able to tune it the way that we wanted to tune it. Here's how we wanted it to be tuned, and then you're in adding the plugin. And I was trying to press them on that at the show, and I don't think anybody wanted to give me any peering behind the curtain on that one. But I think that's the way that things need to go. Like eventually, like if everybody were to be completely honest about the headphones that they produce, I think that there's room for DSP in just about everything. And it's just harder to sell people on the idea that, you know, in order to get this to sound the best, the way that we want it to sound, you got to then tinker with these plugins and stuff like that. And then people don't want to do that. So
I think there's a big contingent the audiophile market that are kind of like purists, and they don't want to deal with EQ. They don't want anything interfering between the headphones, between their chain and the music. You know, you want to get like Tyler said, there's a lot of effort and money and spent trying to get the best analog chain that you can, and really trying to get that chasing that last couple of percent. And so I agree. I think eventually we'll see the market kind of split in two, where
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, exactly. I think
So,
we're kind of on the same
average,
track.
average consumers will have that Bluetooth world. I mean, you're already seeing it now. You have the Beats
You're gonna
versus
have
the audiophile, right? Like,
yeah.
AirPods.
You're gonna have Beats with DSP in the future.
Yeah.
And that's gonna take probably 90% of the headphone market, and then the last 10% is gonna be the audiophile, and that'll be the audio purists.
Yeah.
The difference in what money is being spent in that world.
Oh yeah.
They'll almost equate.
It'll be like 99 and 1. Yeah.
But see, like I don't know, because I mean I think you guys are right that that's how it's gonna go. But I would almost want an audiophile headphone like in the 10% where there is something like a DSP where you can just push a button and say, not necessarily with a plugin, making it very easy to do, right? And have it correct for whatever tuning they weren't able to do, right? So I'm thinking of, imagine you had the best performing driver you could possibly have, and you got it pretty close to the ideal target curve. But if you were to actually get it as close as if you were to get it perfect to the target curve, you'd have to make some sort of concession as far as the technical performance. You have to make some sort of, if you imagine there's some sort of trade-off there from a design perspective, and then you just sort of throw your hands up and go, well, we'll just do the rest with DSP. I'm fine with that. As long as it's easy to do, as long as it's as simple as just pushing a button, which is, I think, in a way, it's what you get when you have an Odyssey headphone, right? When you have an LCD4, for example, I think that's the closest to that concept. And as far as I can tell, Odyssey is the only one who are doing that in the in that last 10% space, right? But I think I think you're absolutely right that like the purists, and I count myself among them. I don't want to be EQing things. I would rather, or it's like what we were talking about earlier. I would rather, if I could have pads that made, for the Elegia, that made it sound like the way that I EQ the Elegia 2, I would use the pads. I would never bother with the EQ.
For me, EQ is mostly useful for being able to figure out how I would tune something without having to actually physically make the change. So if you have whether it's ears, if you have any measurement rig plus EQ plus headphones, that's a pretty powerful kind of means of experimenting. You can kind of get an idea of direction you want to go faster than if you were to just make a physical tweak. To like take them apart, make the tweak, put them back together, listen. Like with EQ, it's just a couple of clicks and you can do it. And it's not going to be the exact same effect. It's not going to be.
But there's potentially a better effect as well.
Potentially. Yeah. I'd like to see. I don't enjoy for my own listening enjoyment, but I'd like to see something sort of like the Smythe Reel, like an open source version of the Smythe Reel. But I don't think there's going to be. You can only get so far until you get an HRTF measurement, right? So, because of how headphones are structured, you're always going to hit that limit. No matter how you tune the frequency response, it's not going to match someone. Well, everyone's HRTF is different, so to get that last 10% of the experience, you're going to have to do that. But to make that kind of a standard, I think we're going to have to bring the price down a lot, and there's going to have, I don't know, some industry standard way to measure people's HRTF effectively. But the way they're doing it with, they have a room that's set up with speakers all around. They've got the ideal setup. I don't know how we would standardize that, or where people would go for that. If Smythe made a deal with like maybe a chain of high-end, audio companies or something like that, audio dealers.
You'd have to go back, right? Every so many years to get it rechecked or reevaluated, right?
Yeah.
But aren't there also companies that are doing that kind of? Or like maybe it is Sonarworks who does this, but there's a company who you can send them your headphones. I mean, they're not doing it based on your actual HRTF. Yeah, it is Sonarwork. Yeah, so they, I imagine like it would be something that they could as an extension to what they're doing already. It's like you could walk in, you could book an appointment, and then not only would you get the specific headphone corrected to whatever the right tuning that they think it is, but not so it wouldn't be the right tuning. It would be your actual HRTF.
I think they might do that, but I'm not. I mean, I don't.
Well, I don't know how they would,
Yeah,
unless they
well, I
have
think,
that.
Yeah, you'd almost have to get like I mean 3D scanners are getting a lot cheaper, and I think there's software out.
Right?
Yeah, and I think there's software now that can take a video and turn it into, if you could do something like that, like imagine if there was software that would allow you to, spin around in a chair in front of a webcam, and yeah, I could just spin around and then them.
You buy the
Exactly.
webcam, and that's part of it. You just have to do the thing.
They have the cameras now that are picking up people's keys and being able to mod them and go find their house and open their house by just taking a picture of the key from like super far away. You've seen that?
Oh, that's terrifying.
That was a
Oh,
big,
wow.
that was a sorry back in the day. That was an issue that people were having.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
it wasn't an issue, but it was rare, but it was one of those things that came out.
That's terrifying.
And in my day job, there's a group of folks who fly drones over the surface of like abandoned mines, and what they'll do is they'll do
LiDAR.
like a flyover video of that mine, and then they can generate a 3D model of the mine based on the video that they did.
They did that with Italy when the big earthquakes. There's a big company that does that for earthquake.
Oh, cool.
It's really, really cool. They'll go through and they'll send all these drones, and that way they can locate where like the worst case scenario places are. They help locate people and like where it's really cool because they map the whole thing like what you're talking about. It's a 3D map. And
Is
they
that
show where the damage was? It's really cool.
Is that actually LiDAR, or is LiDAR something else?
I think it's car. I think they use some of that technology because they use different not lenses, fun thing, weirdness, but capturing technology. So they'll do like the LiDAR versus, I think they even do FLIR. They'll have, that kind of topology type cameras that can map elevation, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know what technology is.
So yeah, I would think if they can do that, someone should be able to make a way. Now, maybe you need 2 cameras to do it, but like a stereoscopic image of maybe you need something like 2 webcams together and then rotate your head around, and then I would think they could. There's got to be some way to do it down and make it more accessible.
That's still pretty cool. We're coming up on an hour and a half here, so I should probably, it's just over an hour and a half, so we should probably cap it there. We're trying to be a little bit more conservative there. I wanted to we'll take some questions from the chat. You have a few there, Tyler?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I got a couple. Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you, Ryan, before we wrap this up. So for example, if I wanted to add a bit of, let's say, lower treble energy to something like the Allegia, just with pads, would that be possible? Or add a bit of bass, right? Let's say because these pads are like, they're not, I think they're like Alcantara or some kind of material. I don't think they're not leather or anything like that. So like if you were to use leather pads, solid leather pads, you might, you can see it there, you might boost the bass a little bit. But then how would you, say you wanted to add a bit of energy at like 4K hertz ish, how would you go about doing something like that?
You could say the material that the pads are made of can impact that, the thickness of the pads and the angle of the pads.
Okay.
I would say like maybe like the the Stelia, like maybe grab Stelia pads. That'd be interesting to see what the Stelia pads would do.
Yeah. I think somebody's done that actually.
I think Ian did it.
Ian do it? Huh? Well, I'm not sure who it was, but I saw there was some pad rolling there on the and there's Dakota pads for them as well. Be another way to go. But so in general, I mean, if you're is there a certain material that correlates to more treble, or a certain like a change that you would do to a pad that correlates to more treble in pads?
So for my example, with the Argon, so on the Mark IIIs, the difference between the 2 and the 3 cut the treble from, let's say, it was more like 7.5K up, went down significantly, and the ZMF protein leather actually boosts that range more relative to, say, the lambskin. So for the Mark IIs, I recommend lambskin because the lambskin seems to reflect, let's say, like the 4 to 6K range more than the 7 to 10K range. whereas the protein is sort of the opposite. So on the Mark IIs, I recommend the lambskin because you get a little more 4 to 6K, a little less 8 to 10K. Whereas in the Mark IIIs, I recommend the protein because you don't need any more 5 to 6. You really want a little more, let's say 7 to 10, 8 to something like that. So yeah, you'll see differences in the upper mids and treble. I would say anywhere from probably 2.5K up, you can see differences. With the material though, probably you're looking more like 4K up. You'll see more of a difference in terms of the amount of treble that's reflected from the different surfaces.
Sorry, which material was that you were saying?
Oh, sorry. And I was just using my example.
Oh, okay. In the
protein versus the protein
gotcha.
versus the lambs. But that's with the same oval pad. So that's keeping the pad structure the same, just changing the surface material. But if you change from say the oval to the icon pads, that makes a pretty big difference. That makes a bigger difference than the material. So you'll see a pretty big dip in the upper mids. I think it's around 4K, something.
So
like
the actual
that.
like physical structure of the pad being different has a bigger impact than the material.
Yeah. They both have an impact, but I would say the physical structure makes a bigger difference.
Okay, that's interesting. Cool. Tyler, did you want to ask or get a few questions from the chat?
Yeah.
Or
So
did you have a few?
I had a couple from myself and a couple from the chat. So I'll start with the ones, real quick ones, and we'll try to keep it short. So, what headphone do you like the most without wanting to mod it?
That's a great question.
Ooh.
That's what
You could say the Argon Mark III.
I would say for open, probably the Arias. For closed, I would say Veritate closed.
There you go. That's my combo. Which I don't have it yet, but one day.
Me personally, I would probably go Veritate closed and or Stelia. Those are the kind of on a tiebreaker. And then for the open, for me would be the kind of a shocker, but the Aeolus.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Because that one has the most capabilities as far as you can pad swap and it changes everything with the pads super a lot. So
and I would say the O-Tour would be my follow-up.
O-Tour. Yeah, that's a good choice. Yeah. I think for me closed would be see, that's the thing, like the question for me would be which headphone would I like the most without wanting to EQ it. Right? And I think because it's easier for me to do that and than it is to start breaking open pads and changing damping material and stuff like that. But I actually see, I would say the Aria, but there's like a 5K or 6K hertz peak there that just sometimes. So I'd have to say for open, it would probably be the Ananda's frequency response. I think that's at least the one that I heard, or even this Sandara, this specific Sandara. And then for closed, probably the Stelia. I would say the Veritate closed, but I haven't reviewed it yet, so I can't, know. Yeah. But the Stelia, that's the cool thing about the Stelia that I didn't fully understand when I was reviewing it, was that there was a bit of unit variation there for those models as well. And maybe it was just again, the early ones sound a bit different from the later ones. But the one that I evaluated later on, I want to say 6 months later, the frequency response was way more linear. It was I measured it on relative to the Harman-like compensation, and it was dead flat except for the bass boost. Oh, wow. But the bass boost was at a much more appropriate spot than the first one that I had. The first one, the bass kind of bled into the mids a little bit. But in the second one that I was evaluating, I was like, holy smokes, this thing is the most neutral thing. I don't know what's going on. It's not what I expected. So the Stelia definitely is one that I didn't feel the need to really EQ much at all.
What did you say? Was it the Sandara or the Stelia that changed?
Well, both, but
okay.
the Sandara was a much bigger change for the whole frequency response. It's a totally. It sounds. I mean, the first one was good too, but it had upper mid-range shout and the bass rolled off. This one, I wouldn't EQ a thing on it. I would just leave it.
Okay.
Same thing with the Ananda, like the one that I was like, it's perfect. Like I don't, I wouldn't EQ it. The Aria, technically, yes, performs better, but I would EQ it a little bit. Yeah.
I've heard the edition. What is it? The Edition X. I've heard, but I don't think I've.
You haven't heard the Ananda? From what I understand, it might be based on that one, but from what I understand, actually the Ananda uses the newer, thinner diaphragm.
Okay.
And overall, like the Edition X has a bigger soundstage. Apparently, I haven't made this comparison, but from what I understand, there is still like a bit of a difference there. Somebody mentioned the headphone. That's also, like, from a frequency response perspective, the headphone is also really close.
Okay.
Did you get a chance to try it, Ryan?
I tried it, but the headband wasn't quite large enough for me, so it kind of squished up the bottoms of my ears. It's like I really wish that wasn't the case. I really want to give it a good, really cool.
Yeah. What I think what a lot of people need to do when they try the headphone is they actually have to because the top head part is really thick. When you put it on, you got to actually push down on the top part so that it properly goes far enough down onto your ears. Because that's what happens when it's a 700-gram headphone, so eventually it does actually kind of sink down a little bit. That's what I noticed after wearing it for like half an hour, 15 minutes. But I think a lot of people, when they just first put it on at the show, they were like, oh, this doesn't quite fit.
You had to.
Yeah, you got to kind of force it.
Well, you have to kind of spread it out, flop it,
flop it, yeah.
And then kind of go from there, and then do the
it can use also a little bit of a bass shelf there, so I wouldn't say I completely wouldn't change the frequency response.
I'm really looking forward to having you hear it now when it comes.
Actually, you mentioned it might be a bit different now, so
because at least to me it changed, and then I know Ian's changed.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, I found the headphone to be quite excellent especially.
I think the rep said they're going to come out with a new.
Yeah, they already said they're coming out with a new headband.
Well, they're trying to. A lot of this was the health crisis in China has made it a little bit difficult to get the existing kind of parts that they were, I think, depending on, and now I think they're looking at other solutions. I don't know, but that I was told sometime around April they might be trying to figure out something else with that. But again, not official word. I don't know what the actual official word is on that.
I think they actually did come out with an official.
Oh, did they?
Statement.
Okay.
That they're working on expanding the notches, but don't quote me just yet, because I want to say that it was that happened.
I don't want to like surprise anybody or throw anybody under the bus with that. Like, Andrew said.
So another quick question then would be, what headphones currently on the market do you want to mod, or would you want to mod?
It's kind of a loaded question in the sense. Well,
how about like in the okay, gotcha. How about this? A headphone that you think would be fun to mod, but not necessarily.
I think it'd be cool to make. I want to see some good closed planers. I'd like to make a closed planer that is not a T50 necessarily. Haven't gotten around to doing that, but
should get some Aeons.
Yeah, well, they have the the Aeon closed. I want to try the new Standaras. Interested to see what those are like.
Okay.
I'd be curious what you'd want to change with the current Standara.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, it's like, am I modding it to change the frequency?
Yeah.
Am I modding it to make it closed? Yeah.
Right. Okay. If you could close off a Standara, that would be crazy.
Okay. So next, I have three more questions.
I thought you were going to say Diana Phi. or AB 1266 TC. I keep lobbying DMS to be like, hey, mod the big one.
He needs to mod that one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of. I always have a hard time getting proper fit with those.
Yeah.
But
it's just,
I do like the presentation. Once it's on your head, really.
Yeah, actually,
downstage.
He helped me get the fit right, like the positioning and everything. And once it was the right kind of positioning, I actually didn't mind the comfort all that much. Like, it was obviously not particularly comfortable because it's like 650 grams or something, and that it doesn't fit like normal headphones do. But I didn't. It has a headband strap system, and I love that. It's so much nicer than. Well, there's the single pieces like this. Actually, these are really comfortable, but like the single piece stuff never is as comfortable, I find, as the strap system. So maybe that's just me.
I totally agree. I think straps are the way to. And theirs, I think, is even. It's not just that the strap's got an elastic on it.
That's right. Yeah, and that helps. So
so once it takes a little effort to get a good fit on it, but once you have a fit, pretty reasonably comfortable. And I really like the presentation on this. So if he can mod those, that would be.
Or just send one to you, and then because really, like I mean, it's what we were talking about before, but like manufacturers who are pushing the boundaries as far as like what's technically possible with detail retrieval and speed and all of this stuff, to then have somebody who is extremely meticulous and focused on frequency response with all the different tools available. I mean, that would be fantastic. I think it would be. I mean, that's why the DMS Diana Phi sounds so good. He's being really meticulous about getting the frequency response. You know.
I think they. I mean, he already is working for them, but if you had other manufacturers, I think look at like having reviewers act as consumers.
Yes.
It's helpful to have people who, have had the experience that you've had without the bias of, making things or particular company.
Yeah, having that pride, right? The anger factor,
the anger factor. Well, definitely, I noticed that with IEMs a lot, where it's like
the pride
people. Well, yeah, it's like people think the thing that they made is the best thing ever, and because they put a lot of work into it, they put a ton of effort, a ton of resources into it.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And to me, it almost seems sort of like, at least in the really high, like a hierarchy of values. If these companies are putting the pursuit of technical performance above everything else, what are they sacrificing? Do they know they're making a frequency response? I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are they so focused on trying to push the boundaries of like detail retrieval that they're not paying attention to the frequency response, or is it an either-or situation where, well, hey, if we don't do this, that pushes us forward. Are we sacrificing frequency, or are we not paying it?
Yes. It goes back to that whole: are you sacrificing? It's gonna be kind of a controversial thing, but like saying the difference between going after the detail, like you're saying, versus the actual enjoyment of the headphones.
Yeah, because I mean, you can appreciate incredible detail retrieval. This is like me with the Abyss AB1266 TC. It's like I absolutely appreciate what it's possible, what's capable of doing, what the detail and all the technical, even the soundstage and slam is fantastic.
Yep.
At the same time, would I want to listen to that headphone with its default tuning, like all the time? Probably not. I would probably enjoy I don't want to say I would enjoy a Sundara more. I don't think that's true. But I would probably enjoy something like an Aria or even a Verite, or open or close, probably more for actually just listening to music and not just to be impressed by the crazy detail. And that's a tough. I mean, there's a balance there, and part of me feels like I would want to be like, nah, I really am addicted to that quality of like the same thing with the LCD4. Like the tonality there is just totally weird, but. That you really do appreciate that quality of what it's capable of doing.
I think frequency response is the most important thing. And then the other, like if you look at, I don't know if you want to call them technicalities, or if you start looking at soundstage imaging, impact or slam, whatever you want. Detail retriever. How do you rank those things, and at what point is, like, I feel like if the frequency response deviates too much from, I mean, I don't want to say a given target, but if the frequency response is too out of whack in any one, it almost doesn't matter the other details of it are.
Because you won't want to listen to it.
Yeah, exactly. And same with comfort. If the headphone's not comfortable, it doesn't matter what it sounds like. I mean, there's degrees of comfort. There's some headphones that are more comfortable than others. But if you have something that's clearly uncomfortable to wear, you're not going to want to use it no matter what it sounds like.
Okay.
That's adorable.
I will come down. Love you. I guess that's my cue.
That's the. Were there any other final questions there, Tyler? Or?
Yeah. So the big ones, I guess I'll skip the other ones. But the big ones were Socrates news. Any Socrates?
I was going to ask the same thing.
Right?
Yeah.
That seems to be the biggest thread there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What about the Socrates stuff? Any particular questions about it?
Just like what's the up and coming news? Anything that's coming out? Like anything that you can relate?
Do you want me to do a video on the Socrates stack?
Hey, if you'd like to check it out, send you one.
Absolutely.
I want to leave announcements up to Soren. I can't really go into details. I'll say there are new things coming, but can't really say too much.
Yeah. Wicked, man. Wicked.
Yeah, I would say we're tentatively going to be at Exponent. So.
Yeah.
Well, if it happens, right? If everything goes according to plan.
Yeah. It'll be. Hopefully, things don't go too bad.
Yeah.
Sorry, my daughter was backing up rapidly and.
But yeah, hopefully we'll get to make some announcements in the not too distant future and get to see some new stuff.
Very, very
Awesome.
cool.
Well, we should probably end it there. Sounds like Tyler has to go for dinner. So, in order to not endanger him from his family, we should probably cut it off there. So thank you so much for joining, Ryan. Everybody who's been following along, and if you're watching this video afterwards, go check out Modhouse, Modhouse Audio. This is where all of his stuff is. And follow him. I don't know, on Twitter. Where's the best place for people to? I
have a Twitter, but I don't use it.
Okay.
I haven't been into last few years. But, we put news updates on our site, and then when we announce new products, we'll probably.
Okay. It sounds like the audio is cutting out here a little bit, but we'll just send everybody to the Modhouse Audio site. So Google Modhouse Audio and you'll get there.
and I'll try and get a better microphone.
It's not the mic, it's the network connection, I think.
Oh, okay.
It's
The east to west coast too sometimes can throw it off too.
Yeah. Anyways, thanks everybody for tuning in, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next live stream soon. Peace.